We're here today to talk about one of the greatest superheroes of all time, and many argue the first traditional comic book superhero of all time, Clark Kent, Superman. I got my one friend here who is a bona fide Superman fan, Brandon, and he's going to help me talk about Superman. Say hi, Brandon.
Hi, everybody!
And he talks like that all the time, 100% of the time. And so, because Supes is basically your favorite superhero, right?
Yep, indeed.
Why don't you kick this off? Tell us what are some of your earliest Superman memories and what first got you into Superman? Why do you like Superman?
Well, his alter ego Clark Kent is a nerdy news reporter, very clumsy. Kind of reminds me of myself.
Whoa!
So I can kind of identify with Clark Kent / Superman. What really drew me to Superman in the first place was his colorful costume, and not to mention his superpowers: X-ray vision, heat vision, cold breath. Superhuman strength. He can fly.
Fucking A.
So, I mean, you don't really need, like, special gadgets like Batman does, but then again, Batman is a mortal man, relies completely on his intellect and, not to mention his money to back up his projects.
Sure, they're kind of like polar opposites of each other.
Exactly.
If I could only choose just one simple superpower, like no strings attached, no extra powers that gave me this ability, I could only just do this and that's it. No brainer. Ever since childhood, I would fly like Superman. I mean, I wouldn't be against flying like the Angel,
right.
Flying like Archangel and have wings, but I think it would be pretty neat to just be able to zip around like Superman.
Not to mention very convenient. You don't
Sure.
have to walk across town if you get invited to a party.
Oh, fuck that. No, here, real talk. If I could fly, I wouldn't even live like a normal guy.
Yeah.
I just go where the fuck I want.
You wouldn't have to.
I'd be a nomad. I just go wherever I want, fly wherever I want. Oh, I want to go to Monte Carlo today? I'm doing it. I'm doing it right now. Because Superman, if you could legitimately fly like Superman, that motherfucker can fly at, supersonic speeds.
Yeah, you could be...
Or even faster.
You could go from America to Europe in, two minutes, maybe?
Faster. Just boom, done.
You're there.
Yeah, you're done. So getting back on track.
So,
what are some of your earliest Superman memories? Like, as a little kid, what are things that stood out to you that you saw or experienced that made you think, man, Superman's awesome?
Well, the way he took on Lex Luthor, but also in the same breath, what really drew my attention and was really flabbergasted by the whole fact was the death of Superman was killed by Doomsday.
Oh Christ! Spoilers. What was the first medium that you first experienced Superman in that you remember? Was it the old Superman, the 70s Superman movies? Was it?
Yeah, it was definitely the Christopher Reeve films.
Okay. Or was it, did you get to check out any Superman comics as a kid?
Here and there, but I mean, I come from a family that we're not super rich. We're like a medium, but what came first is, putting food on the table. But, I barely made any kind of allowance to go out and buy comic books.
Yeah.
So it kind of made it kind of hard, but I would always love going to the comic book store, flipping through the pages of Superman and, just getting a vague storyline of what was going on in Superman's world.
Yeah.
And, of course, it was disheartening that I couldn't buy the comic, but, that's that.
Yeah. Well, that was my story with the X-Men in the 90s, was that I would have money to buy some of the issues, but I didn't have money to buy all of the issues, and so I would go to a bookstore or whatever and just kind of sit on the floor and read the whole issue. That's how I kept up. But, my first experiences with Superman, we've talked before, I've talked before about how I had a interesting childhood. My grandmother was not high on superheroes. She was under the impression that anybody with superpowers who didn't get them from God, was evil. Even though, in the same breath, she read all sorts of science fiction shit like Dune, where you had a guy the Kwisatz Haderach, who was literally, he became a living god. But that's fine. You know.
Yeah.
But if somebody's got eye beams or super strength, that's the line. That's the line right there to her. And so I didn't get to experience Superman until my teens, really. Although the only connection to Superman I have from my actual childhood was when I was about, I'm going to say, 5. For some reason, as a little kid, she must have adopted her dumbass stance against superheroes later in my childhood. Because when I was a little kid, I'm going to say when I was 4 years old, I had Spider-Man pajamas. Like the kind of little kid pajamas with the feet and everything. And
nice.
One year she just put me in that because I also grew up dirt poor. And she bought enough like cheapo like Halloween face paint to like paint my face up in a kind of makeshift Spider-Man mask get up. And so I went as Spider-Man at like 4 years old. And then the very next year, like the year and a half that I lived in Paradise when I was a toddler, a kid, I think that was the only year that I ever actually got like one of those cheapo, like store-bought costumes with like the plastic mask and
nice.
shit. Then that was Superman. I actually had like the tights and
nice.
like a plastic Clark Kent, like Superman mask.
Nice.
And I wore that. We went to a haunted house or some shit, whatever. But I didn't really get to experience Superman until my teens, and I saw the first couple Christopher Reeve, Richard Donner directed Superman films, and I liked those. I liked the Reeve Superman, but in general, I was a Marvel guy. And in my teens, and it didn't help that I had certain friends, like a certain feathered friend, if you will.
Yeah, right.
Who was he insisted he was pro DC, and so there were people in my life that would instigate like, oh, you know, Marvel is fucking whatever, and you know,
right.
And like so that kind of drew me further, you know. But I was under the impression, as a teen, that like, oh, DC Comics is fucking cheesy. Look at all what kind of name is like Superman, and he's too powerful. You know, he's got all these powers. And I mean, there is an argument to make there, especially in the gold, like the Silver Age.
Yeah.
But you know, like I said at the time, because I wasn't really that familiar with most DC heroes to begin with, that like, oh, the only DC hero I like is Batman, because I did like the Batman animated series as a kid. I watched that on TV.
Same here.
I didn't really watch much of the Superman, like the 96 Superman cartoon, even though I should have, because I probably would have changed my opinion earlier. And I distinctly remember seeing the first episode of the 2000 Justice League cartoon on TV and thinking like, oh, this sucks or whatever. I don't know what my problem was, but at 17, 18 years old, that's how I felt. And like, later on, I'll go back and watch the Justice League cartoon and go, dude, what the fuck's your problem? This show's awesome. But like, so anyways, I don't know. I softened up my stance on that shit on DC Comics into my like early adulthood. Just like, you know, as a kid and even a little bit of a teen, like I had grown up a Nintendo kid, and so I was definitely pro Nintendo and kind of anti-Sega. It was the same thing. And then when I got older, I grew the fuck up. You know, I got over it and realized, like, you know what? Sega makes some good games. Yeah. So my point is, in this whole rant, mini rant that I went on, is that I eventually came to appreciate and even like the character of Clark Kent and Superman.
Right. And personally, I've always been a DC guy, but I've always had respect for Marvel.
Sure.
I think I've always been one of those about the only friend that wasn't, you know, judging you that you like.
Oh, sure.
You know, specifically want, you know, Marvel.
Well, you don't have wings. You don't have a little beak.
Yeah, that's true. It's true.
Wink, wink.
No name drops.
So, I would say, okay, so more recently, let's say within the last 5-6 years, I have gotten more into collecting comics, let's say, and I in my gotta catch 'em all phase, I got a bunch of DC shit too, and so I started reading a bunch more DC shit. And that plus my appreciation for, like, the 2004 era, like, Justice League Unlimited cartoon, which I really, really liked, which was an extension of the Justice League cartoon. And then going back and actually watching the Superman cartoon, and I'd already been a fan of the Batman cartoon, and like, so that DC animated universe definitely had a hand in waking me up to the fact that, like, no, you know what, DC actually has a lot of cool heroes and a lot of cool stories.
Indeed.
And so more recently, even though it hurt, I actually went back because I wanted to see what it was all about, even though I'd read some shit. The pivotal moment, one of the biggest pivotal moments in DC Comics history was the Crisis of Infinite Earths. Because before that, leading up to that, for decades, DC had created this mess for themselves where they had a bunch of different parallel Earths. And it just created continuity problems, and it was kind of a headache. And so they had this brilliant idea that they were going to do the Crisis of Infinite Earths story. Like, it was one of the first major comic crossovers ever done, where it was like it may have been the first comic book company crossover event where almost literally every single title that they were putting out at the time had some sort of tie-in to the Crisis of Infinite Earths. It was a line-wide crossover because you had this bad guy called the Anti-Monitor who was whatever. There was this guy called the Monitor who was kind of like a guardian of reality or whatever, and then you had the Anti-Monitor who was created who wanted to fucking piss on all that. And so basically the Anti-Monitor set up these characters to basically, well, this one guy in particular, I think it was called the fucking Harbinger or whatever, I can't remember off the top of my head, who would go around destroying these other Earths. All these alternate Earths were getting wrecked and just completely blown up. And so, like, the Monitor fucking started... His only idea to save all these alternate Earths was to basically destroy them also. But instead of completely wiping them out, he was going to... and crunch them all into one Earth. He was going to make one reality, the prime reality, or whatever, like, the main new reality. And, like, it was a decent concept, and it was very interesting, and it had a shit ton of characters, but as I had read before reading it myself, like, it kind of turns into a clusterfuck. Yeah, at the end towards the story. That, one of the big things that happened towards the end, spoilers, was that the original Supergirl died. She sacrificed herself trying to fight the Anti-Monitor and lost.
Oh, man.
And that was, I'm sure you've seen the cover. There's, like, an iconic classic 80s cover of Superman holding Supergirl's dead body.
Oh, okay.
No!
Yeah.
But anyways, so yeah, after I got through that, which was rough, I picked up, I'm sure you're familiar with, the 6-issue, 6-part, John Byrne did a reboot, basically, for Superman after that, where it was called The Man of Steel.
Yeah.
And that was a 6-part where it was a retelling of his new history.
Right.
Yeah, and they in that sense, like, they did some weird shit post-Crisis because like, they basically kept continuity going for a lot of characters like Batman, Flash, Green Lantern, etc. But a couple of characters they completely rebooted and pretended like they just had recently appeared.
Right.
And that was like Superman and Wonder Woman specifically were like the two that they really kind of rebooted. And so So what I did was I originally wanted to read the storyline you mentioned, the Death and Return of Superman story, and but instead of just wanting to read that, I'm like, oh well, what if I miss something? What if there's some seeds before that like fill in more? So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna read all the way from John Byrne's reboot all the way through like the late '80s to like '93. So right. I did over a period of time. I eventually got through, and you know what? The moral of the story is, I enjoyed most of that reboot stuff. Not all of it was great. There was some dumb shit, but I enjoyed the way they wrote Clark Kent. I enjoyed a lot of the storylines. I liked the fact that they humanized him more. He was still fucking Superman, and he was still one of the most powerful superheroes on the earth, but like, as you're well aware, the Silver Age Superman had gotten a bit ridiculous.
Yeah.
Silver Age Superman was the guy who could go back in time, or turn back time even by fucking spinning around the earth like he did at the end of Superman 1.
Yep.
And
Because Lois Lane died.
And he, Superman, that Silver Age Superman was the guy who fucking, like, could push a planet to move it, you know, out of the way of an asteroid or whatever. It's like, he was ridiculously powerful.
Yeah.
They had just kept up. When Superman first appeared in the late 30s, he literally was kind of like the Hulk. He was really fast. I mean, when they had that whole radio spiel, faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, he could leap tall buildings in a single bound. That was deliberate. That wasn't a euphemism, because originally he couldn't fly. Originally, he could only jump really far like Hulk. He didn't get the ability to fly until the Fleischer cartoons from the 40s. Which were really good. If you've never seen the Max Fleischer cartoon shorts from the 40s, they were really, really good. They were really true to what was going on in Superman at the time. And they were one of the first cartoons to use, like, rotoscoping. Which, are you familiar with what rotoscoping is?
No, I'm not.
It's a process by which you film live actors and then you animate panel by panel, like frame by frame, over that. So that's why those old cartoons look so realistic. Like, they move so realistic. And, so yeah, but when they were creating those cartoons, they actually asked DC Comics at the time, hey, it's kind of awkward trying to animate a guy jumping really far. Would it be okay if we just made Superman fly? And DC Comics was like, yeah, why not?
Sure.
And so they did. The cartoons were the first thing to actually show Superman straight out flying. And then they just adopted that to the comics. Like, man, that's actually pretty sweet, you know? Yeah. And so that's how it happened.
Because in the earlier TV show with George Reeves,
he
had to get a running start, and he would, like, jump out of a window.
Yeah.
And, you know, they would do their, you know, special effects like he's flying through the air or, you know, whatever. Which is ironic that George Reeves, you know, would jump, you know, run and jump out of a window, because evidently he killed himself doing that.
Oh, yeah, it's, that is ironic.
I hate to bring that up, but...
No relation to Christopher Reeve.
None.
Or Keanu Reeves.
I know Kung Fu.
You know, so he originally just was a super strong guy who was bulletproof. He could eventually fly. But then over the decades, like into the 50s and the 60s, etc., they... in the 60s especially, Marvel... In the early 60s, after the whole McCarthy era, like, shitting on, like, superhero comics, when they made a comeback in the early 60s, and Marvel started coming up with all these heroes, and then DC started coming up with more heroes, and so, like, they still wanted Superman to be, like, the guy, and so they started kind of coming up with more abilities he had, and that's where, like, oh, fucking heat vision, X-ray vision, super breath because he's got super strong lungs, you know, like all that kind of shit. I think at some point before they finally did the 80s reboot, it's entirely possible that at some point some writer might have even given Clark like some kind of like telepathy or something. I'm like, why? He doesn't need it, right?
I mean, and he's also got super hearing too.
Oh, that's true. He's got super every sense.
So you don't
super
really
smell.
Yeah. You don't really need telepathy if you can hear like long distances, because you can just eavesdrop on conversations.
Motherfucker can.
You don't have to be like Miss Cleo or one of those.
Miss Cleo.
One of those psychic, you know, crap, you know, whatever, mystic people to, you know, yeah. Whatever.
But no, I mean Superman. That's a good point. Superman can fly over Metropolis and pinpoint, you know, Jimmy Olsen's voice in a building, you know.
Right.
He doesn't need, you know. But, so, yeah, in the reboot, they scaled that back. Like, he was still awesome, but he was beatable. Because the only things he was really vulnerable to by the end of the Silver Age, were, shit was pretty good. The most famous, of course, being kryptonite.
Oh, yeah.
That's like the meme by now. But also magic. He was vulnerable to kryptonite and magic.
Yep.
And in the reboot, he was still vulnerable to those things. Those things were still like, oh shit, right? But he could also get hurt. He could get badly hurt by strong enough villains. Like it was dubious in the 80s and 90s whether or not Superman could, let's say, survive a point-blank nuclear blast, right? If
Right.
someone dropped a nuclear bomb right on him, would he die? That was a dubious point. Whereas in the Silver Age, there was no question, no, he's going to survive. He's Superman, right? You know, so they definitely mortalized him a bit more. And,
But the thing is, Superman could just catch an A-bomb and, push it out into space. Or
sure.
whatever. You'd be like, seriously? Come on.
Seriously, guys. But,
Nice Keith Apicary.
that was, I didn't mean to, but that was some Keith Apicary right there. You know, I think Superman's pretty cool, too, you know. But, that's pretty good. Sorry, Nathan Barnett. Shout out to Nathan Barnett. I'm not trying to steal your stick. I didn't realize till right now that maybe I could do a pretty good impression.
Yeah, I was like, oh, shit, that's a good Keith Apicary impression.
You know, Nintendo was okay, but I just want to say Sega rules. But, anyway, you know where I got that from. We're off topic, but you know where I got that from was my impression of the Nature Boy, whoa, Ric Flair, because he has a little bit, he talks out of the side of his mouth a little bit, and it's still you lisp a little bit.
Of a list.
Yeah, listen, Hulk Hogan, you couldn't beat me on your best day, woo! Yeah. Anyway, back to point. Back to point.
Case in point.